university, anywhere else for that matter, they're going to be better served by the legislation that Dan Tehan has put through the Parliament. We're going to be making sure that through David Littleproud, that the agricultural code that's going before National Cabinet tomorrow is what it needs to be. We're also making sure, of course, that water, that all-important resource for Australia, whether it's the Murray-Darling Basin and the work that Sir Angus Houston, the new chair of the MDBA, and Minister Keith Pitt, or whether it's the water infrastructure, and we're certainly making sure that we invest heavily in that regard. We're getting things done. Nationals in government succeeding, achieving and getting good wins for and on behalf of regional Australia, which is hurting. Regional Australia, like the rest of the country, is hurting. COVID-19, of course, has had a great impact on our communities. And of course, we know that many of our communities have not had a COVID case. And if they have, it's been very limited, and it's been a long time since, indeed, they've had a COVID case. And the border rules that have been put in place by states have hurt our communities. There's some tragic, tragic stories of people who haven't been able to access the health services that they've generally been able to use. There's been stories where, of course, families haven't been able to attend funerals. These are heartbreaking stories, and I do want to commend those Nationals who live in the border communities for the advocacy that they have shown, the leadership that they have demonstrated to bring about better outcomes for the people who have been adversely affected. Why is it fair that AFL hierarchy can just go to the state of Queensland and be allowed to go to a launch, albeit of the AFL Grand Final? And no one likes the AFL more than I do, but when people can't access health, when people can't go to a funeral of a loved one, of a family member, this is just not right and it's not fair. I'm very much looking forward to the National Cabinet process tomorrow to ensure that the work that David Littleproud has done, the practical, pragmatic measures that we've worked, that he's worked with our premiers, with our indeed agriculture ministers, is able to bring about an agricultural code that is sensible for our farmers to be able to go across the river, go across the border, to be able to tend stock, to be able to go and do what they need to do as far as their crops and as far as their agricultural workforce labour is concerned. And I commend Scott Morrison, the Prime Minister of this country, for the work that he's doing, but there's a big opportunity there for the premiers to come on board as well, go through that process to make sure that the work that we've done as far as the agriculture code is concerned is achieved, and of course also to make sure that that hotspot definition, there is consistency across the board. We've achieved it through freight, we've achieved it through transport, and we need to be able to do it in agriculture. I might now hand over to David to make a few more remarks, and then we'll take some questions.
Thanks, Michael. Look, just under 2 weeks ago at National Cabinet, the premiers of all the states asked the federal government to come to the party and try and bring up an agricultural work code because they couldn't do it themselves. They couldn't agree amongst themselves about how they could do it. Well, we've done it. We're giving it to them tomorrow. We're taking it to National Cabinet and we're saying to them, this is your opportunity to lead. This is a federated country. This is an opportunity for them to show that in times of crisis, our federation works just as well as when we are in the good times. This is an opportunity for them to take the leadership of this issue, particularly that is hurting regional rural Australia. It's hurting our agricultural supply chains and it's hurting families. This is an opportunity for them to show that they don't just lead for their capital cities, they lead for all of their states. The opportunity is there for them to take because they couldn't do it themselves. So this is a test of leadership of our premiers for them to come together. We have created a code that in fact is prescriptive as was requested, and in fact the Chief Medical Officer of this country has looked at it and reviewed it. So now the premiers must have some medical or clinical advice to not support it, and I would encourage them to bring that forward. We have worked as closely as we can with the states, but ultimately this is a decision for the states to make. They are the ones that have the ownership of this, have the opportunity to lead this. We were able to do it for freight, and the insanity of this is that with freight, you've got truck drivers coming out of Melbourne, out of hotspots in Melbourne, and being allowed to go right across the country, carrying freight right across the country. Yet we can't do that for a farmer or an ag worker. That just doesn't make sense. That's not common sense. These people are coming out of areas that don't have COVID, yet we're letting truck drivers and freight companies move people around that come from a COVID area, hotspot. So this is just insanity that needs to stop, and this is the frustration the Australian people are feeling. We just want to get back to some common sense, some compassion and understanding that you have to govern for all the country. And I have to say, as a Queenslander, I'm ashamed today when the Premier of Queensland can allow 400 AFL executives to swan around a resort on the Gold Coast, but won't allow teenage boarding school children to go home to see their parents into remote New South Wales, is abhorrent. It's wrong. Australians don't do that to other Australians. You've got to get your priorities right. This is about people, not about a game of football. No one remember 2 days after it. Great win that you've got it, but what's more important are those young children that are fragile, that want to see their parents. They have such a burden already by the fact that they have to get their education away from home. And they don't complain about that, but they just want some understanding, some common sense.